All right. Welcome everyone to the Fall into Tech podcast, hosted by myself. I'm Jameel Matin, and I'm here with my friend Michael Rodriguez. We're two Marines turned techies, and on this podcast, we're going to chat with fellow veterans about their tech journey. From military to technology, as well as other tech professionals, so that we can help you with your tech career.
Yeah, tune in for weekly interviews where we discuss specific tech roles, career paths, and just general tips for succeeding in tech. And, with this being episode one, I guess why are we starting this podcast? Really, we just want to provide practical advice, share inspiring stories, and just create a community for veterans in tech to really just help each other in our careers.
Yeah, and we're also open to suggestions for changes to the podcast from listeners. So if you want to be on the show, let us know. We're going to drop our contact information in the description channel. So let's create a community where veterans can help each other in tech. Michael, why don't we kind of break the ice by you telling us a funny military or tech career story?
Yeah, we're gonna try to do this with every guest we have on, so I guess it's fair that we do it. I'd say from military time, a funny story would be back when I was in kind of initial training to join the Marine Corps. I didn't know how to swim, right? So Marines are amphibious. So while everyone else was kind of doing pool PT and swimming laps, I was on the side just making sure I didn't drown and learning how to swim. So thanks, Gunny, for making me keep getting in there. Appreciate you. What about you, Jamil?
Nice. Yeah, the I think it's called like the die for life. That must have been interesting for you if you weren't able to swim. But for me, I was a fat body and used like a fat waiver to get into the Marine Corps. Lost a bunch of weight, and my mom couldn't recognize me on graduation day at MCRD San Diego. So I was just standing there. I was like, "Hello,"
I'm
but
sure she was
yeah,
happy though.
yeah, she definitely was.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, tell us more about the Marine Corps. Why do you choose the Marine Corps, and what years do you serve? What was your military occupation?
Yeah, I mean, I chose the Marine Corps because if I wanted to be a bear, I wanted to be a grizzly bear. And
Sure.
I, went into the ground level MOS. So my primary military occupation specialty was 0311, which stands for rifleman. And my secondary was 8152, which is Marine Corps Security Forces. And I was part of a team called FAST Team, Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. If you've seen the movie Rules of Engagement, it's a really good depiction of what fast Marines do, quick reaction forces to embassies and things like that. So, served from 2007 to 2012, and was part of Second Fast Company, and then later with First Battalion, First Marines, 1-1 down in Camp Horno. Um, yeah, Michael, what about you? What made you choose the Marines, and what years did you serve, and your military occupation?
Yeah. So I served from 2014 to end of 2020. I was an artillery officer, and yeah, I served in a few different units. So first one was Fox Battery 210, where I was fire direction officer. Then I jumped over to Kilo Company 36, where I was the fire support team leader. And then I jumped back over to 210, was logistics officer for the unit, assistant logistics officer for the unit. And then I left 210 and went over to be an instructor at the basic school where we train brand new lieutenants before they hit the fleet. Um, yeah, so kind of stayed on the East Coast, deployed on 24th MU with BLT 36 in 2017. But yeah, that was pretty much my time in the Marine Corps for the most part.
Cool. And for listeners that don't know what BLT, Battalion Landing Team, and so you were part of 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines for the year there.
Yeah, pretty much battalion organizes into a battalion landing team and gets a bunch of attachments like artillery and AAVs and all kinds of stuff. And that's how BLT is formed.
Nice.
So yeah,
Yeah,
what kind of going back to you? What was the best and worst part of the military for you?
it was pretty intense. So that created a lot of camaraderie and being part of FAST. We traveled a lot to places like Rhoda, Spain, and Israel, and Cuba as well. And then when I hit the fleet with 1-1, we did a MEU, hit up Australia, Dubai, other countries in the Middle East like Kuwait, and got to see a good chunk of the world. Um, and when I think about the worst parts of the military, I think about like the last minute changes to schedules, or we just hit a port in Australia or something, and they're like, all right, guess what? Your section's got duty for the first 2 days or something like that, and so morale would go down. Just those little surprises didn't really fit well with me, but it's the nature of how the Marine Corps works, or at least that's how it worked at that time. But yeah, what about you, Michael? What would you say is were the best parts and the worst parts for you?
Definitely agree with you on the traveling. That was definitely fun. But I'd say the best part was probably just the people. I felt like we were always kind of in a group of friends, no matter what was going on, just because of the way units are set up and the way you go different places. So I feel like you were always hanging out with friends, even during not so fun times. And then the worst part, I would say, would just be the classic doing things you don't want to do sometimes, as far as sitting in the rain, it's cold, you're hungry, you're tired, whatever it may be. You're always going to have those parts no matter who you're in the military. So just some of those parts sometimes are not so fun.
Yeah, I agree. I think after I've been out since 2012, and I kind of forget about the field life, and what I realize is like you forget the pain but remember the glory, and that's kind of how I remember the Marine Corps nowadays. But let's talk about why we're doing this podcast. So, why did you choose to transition into tech instead of another field? I imagine being like a ground artillery officer. Um, Tech is so kind of like the opposite of that. So I'm curious to hear how you
Yeah, there
transitioned.
there weren't too many artillery roles in the civilian sector open, but yeah, a lot of my friends transitioned to kind of leadership roles. That's kind of the most marketable experience we have. So getting into tech was a little different, especially because I majored in criminal justice. But while in the service, I always liked messing with the latest tech gear, whether it be talking aircraft or tracking troops. And, people would come to me for help setting up different tech things that we would use. So I wanted to leave the military and find a way to still learn the newest tech, build something of my own, which is kind of what led me to doing the whole software engineering thing. What about you?
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, when I got out in 2012, I did a series of career changes. As soon as I got out, I went to college. I went to San Diego State, got a degree in international security and conflict resolution, and I thought I was going to do government work. I know some languages. I could read Arabic, and thought I was going to continue something in the defense, industry. And I had 2 years of my GI Bill remaining, so I wanted to get like a professional degree. Was debating between like a master's or an MBA, but I started going through, started endeavoring towards law school. Studying for the LSAT, which is predominantly logic type questions. Was taking courses on the LSAT for like 3 or 4 months, and um, I was doing Uber at that same time. And when I was doing that, I would take like little bathroom breaks at my buddy's startup in LA. And when I walked into his office, just it's totally different from anything I've ever seen. There's just like snacks everywhere. People are wearing like shorts and flip flops, and um, there was just this buzz in an open office environment, which I haven't seen before. Totally different from like the classic, law firm where everyone's wearing like a suit and tie, or um, it's like not as highbrow, but um, just the culture really, really made me gravitate towards tech. I, um, yeah, I think it was just those things what led me there. Um,
Snacks will entice you.
yeah, the snacks will get you, especially coming from a fat body life here. But when you think about transitioning, what resources did you use to get into tech, and what resources were lacking?
Yeah, so when I was still on active duty, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and decided I wanted to do something in tech with no tech experience. So I started just going on good old Google and researching what roles in tech there are, what they mean, as much as I can, just from random articles and this and that, and ended up finding software engineering. Once I found that, well, I figured out I didn't know how to code, so I started going on YouTube to start just watching some tutorials. Whenever I was in the field, I was trying to code pretty much. And once I learned the basics, I knew I needed to take it to kind of another level. I didn't know if I want to go back to school or what. Found this program called Code Platoon. Again, not sponsored, right? But it was a great program. It's about 3.5 months, and you just learn full stack software development. Full stack being front end and back end. Front end being what a user sees on, let's say, a web app. Back end being database and stuff that holds the data. And so I went through Code Platoon, coded a lot every single day, and then towards the end, I used something called LeetCode, which is a website where you can practice coding challenges, which is what is used for coding interviews when you interview for companies. So that's really what I used, and then was able to kind of leverage all that to get a job with the help of Code Platoon.
Very
What about you?
cool.
Well, actually, you actually mentioned what was missing as well, right? So
Yep.
for me specifically, I would say people to talk to in tech. Like I said, not too many people I knew, if any, transition into tech, and didn't really have anyone to reach out to, ask for tips on, ask about roles and this and that. So I guess that's also part of why we are doing this podcast. Um, but yeah, what about you? What resources did you use? What was missing?
Yeah, similar story to yours. A lot of Google, a lot of Stack Overflow. I told the listeners earlier that I was kind of shifting from law into tech, and I came across a book called "Quit Law and Code," written by William Haw. And the two main kind of points he made in that book was time and return of investment, and that really made a lot of sense to me. That book talked about how to get into coding boot camps and things like that. So I went through a couple coding boot camps myself, Sabio in Culver City, Los Angeles, and then V School down in Salt Lake City, Utah. Um, and used other software platforms to help me learn. Code Academy, which was starting to kind of take off back in 2014. And so diving into like HTML, CSS, and then graduating from there to like free code camp. And then um, I went right into this platform called Edibit, similar to LeetCode, but it's more like crawl, walk, run. And it was just like a really nice way for me to like level up on my coding. So a lot of credit to Edibit. As far as what resources were lacking, I think similarly to what you gave, a lot of like unknowns, and it was like really tough to like figure out those unknowns because there's so many resources out there in the cesspool of information. So, um, you know, um, luckily I found like Operation Code, which was super helpful. They have really great mentors, and um, that community really helped me kind of break into tech as well. Um, yeah.
Nice. Nice, yeah. Kind of with, I guess, what you know now. What advice would you give to your younger self or someone else maybe trying to break into tech?
I would say for me, I think just really honing down the principles of computer science, like the solid principles and the dry principles, rather than trying to land my first job right away. That's the advice I would give myself. Really hone down the fundamentals before trying to like step into the industry. I think having the fundamentals and building more projects would have definitely decreased the level of like imposter syndrome that I first had. Um, yeah, what advice would you give to your younger self, Michael?
I guess kind of going off the imposter syndrome thing, step one, try not to compare yourself to anyone else except your previous self, because there's always someone that's better at coding, always someone who's got the role you want to get to, whatever it may be. So I would just start with, it's possible, right? Because I took a risk myself trying to get into tech when I was leaving active duty because I didn't have a job lined up when I left active duty. I was going to coding boot camp and then kind of seeing how it worked out. So believe in yourself and you can do it. Just have a plan, have a set plan, which you have researched. Make sure it's the role you want, so that you're not kind of having to do too many shifts later on, even though things will happen. Um, but yeah, just have a plan, use that same work ethic from the military and civilian world, and things will work out. I think.
Nice. So tell us more about your background now. How long have you been working in tech, and what roles and companies have you been a part of?
Yeah, so I've been in tech now again, pretty much right after I finished Code Platoon, which is right after I left the military. So a little over 3 years now. First, I worked at JP Morgan Chase as a software engineer on a fairly large team, 100 plus people, building an app for some clients. And that was a great experience, just getting kind of thrown into this large team, learning how software engineers run things with, daily stand up meetings, which is where people give their updates from yesterday, today, any blockers, things like that, how we talk to clients to figure out what they want in the app, how that gets translated into building the app and then refining it. So that was great. And then I ended up leaving there after about a year because I wanted to come back to North Carolina for personal reasons. And I ended up getting a job at another financial institution, um, where I'm at now. And I've been here for about 2 years. And it's great as well. A lot different still because this team's only about 10 people, and instead of kind of maintaining and building on legacy code, we were building a brand new app here. So got to see kind of both sides of legacy versus new app, small team, big team. Um, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it so far.
Nice.
What about you? What roles, how long you've been in the industry now?
Yeah, about 7 years, and all across the gamut. I would say from software development to um, growth and marketing to um, recruiting and hiring to even sales, like B2B and business to consumers, and like B2B businesses to business type sales. And my first role was at this venture capital firm in Brentwood, California. They were building like Yelp for beaches, and that's where I kind of got my first taste of startup life, and um, really kind of wanted to learn about startups. On my off time, was doing courses with like Y Combinator Startup School. Started volunteering for organizations like Operation Code. I became like their director of public policy. Um, and for example, the growth roles, we for folks that don't know what growth marketing is, you're basically utilizing um, you're um, trying to grow the company using data, right? So to give you an example, um, I think growth became popularized with this individual named Shamath Palihapitiya, who's now a billionaire. He, I think, stood up Facebook's growth team. Started the think about like, hey, we need a mobile app, we need to translate from English to other languages so other people can use it. And I can't think of any company that doesn't want to grow. So growth marketers, using data, try to experiment different ways to help the company grow. I've done hiring as well. The company that I was hiring for, 75% of their engineers has a PhD. So we were really looking for cream of the crop people, and it taught me a lot about how to approach hiring and just that whole sort of process. And then sales side of things, a lot of, you know, thinking about what ways we can help people solve their problems with our software, and kind of creating a narrative how our software will solve their problem. So you got to do a lot of outbounds, a lot of calls, a lot of follow-ups, a lot of like objection handling, that sort of thing. So
I
yeah,
guess
that's
I guess a
yeah. Go
question
ahead.
on that. So I know talked about for me to get into software engineering, I did the coding boot camp. I know a lot of people do that. I know a lot of people also go to college and do a computer science degree or some kind of technical degree, or maybe you just learn to code on your own and build some projects and you're able to show that to employers. Um, but now to get in some of these sales roles or growth roles, what does that look like to actually get into those roles as far as skills you need, how you get in?
Yeah, I think, if you can start with like freelancing or demonstrating that you have sales skills. For me, I first got into a startup where they were just looking for somebody to get things done. So it's like a general, I don't know, like a doer, which involved a lot of different things. And um, part of that was sales, building lists, reaching out to people. And that's how I kind of built my resume for the sales side of things. For somebody that's looking to break into sales, start freelancing, start maybe reaching out to companies and putting yourself out there, and try to get an internship in a sales role, seek mentorship, and yeah, just do a lot of online classes on like tech, SaaS software sales, things like that. um, but once you get into the groove of things, you start building your sales pipeline, you start closing deals. It's an unbelievable feeling when you kind of like, um, you just rely on that process, and then the process rewards you. So those are some of the resources on how to break into sales. Um, so yeah, um, I'm curious, what would you say are the best and worst parts of working in tech for you?
For me, I would say the best part is you're never bored, I guess. There's always a new problem to solve as far as coding for the app. There's always a new feature to add for the app. There's always a new language or framework or new technology to learn. So it's never boring, changes every day. Worst part, technology is always changing, right? As well. So it can be daunting, perhaps sometimes, as far as, oh, I just learned this technology, but now they just changed it to this whole thing, and this is the latest and greatest. So you have to be able to manage, you know, just picking a reliable stack, especially as a new software engineer, and just diving into that instead of trying to be distracted by, every little shiny new toy that comes out in the tech sector. What about you for best and worst?
Yeah, I think the best parts is like the ability to, you know, create something from your imagination. I did that with the Fall In hackathons. Like I had this idea of creating hackathons for veterans as they were breaking into tech, and with this idea, I was able to build a web presence and start working on SEO, and just like how you can use tech to like grow an idea is really fascinating to me. And I mean, technology in itself is just so fascinating. How you know, from like top down, like you start writing in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and how that ultimately gets written down in memory is super fascinating to me. The worst parts for me right now is like how volatile tech is. Um, it's pretty unpredictable on how things are going to unfold in the future, as far as like AI coming in and kind of what's the right word here, like um, disrupting the industry, I would say. There's platforms out there that will, code for you, write tests for you, and it does it so quick and so like effortlessly. So, um, and then you also hear about tech layoffs as well. So those are kind of like the main worst things about tech for me. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, I'd say that as far as AI goes, right now, especially, I think software engineers, maybe later in the future, I don't know what's going to happen, but for right now, I think you just need to learn how to leverage it. Maybe it's ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot helping you write code faster and more efficiently, or helping you write documentation, whatever it may be. But definitely should be leveraging it and learning it to some degree, or anyone should, not just software engineers, but definitely agree with that. And
yeah, and it's
then,
like it's a great way to learn as well using these tools. Like you could, for examples like, hey, explain it to me like I'm five. How does promises work in JavaScript? It's a lot quicker, I think, going instead of like combing through the documentation and stuff like that. So it can be really incredibly helpful when it comes to learning as well.
definitely. I know you mentioned kind of the Fallen Hackathon. I'll help you plug it there because I was once a participant in the hackathon, in the very first Fallen Hackathon,
Yeah.
and was awarded best presenter. I think just because you felt bad for me though, um,
No, I think you were.
but yeah, that was that's a great hackathon you got going there. And you know what, you mentioned startups as well. I think you mentioned Y Combinator, but if you are interested in startups, I think like we both are, that startup school program they have has some great courses there as another resource for you if you're kind of looking to go the startup route. So we can link that as well in the description, and we'll also link anything else we've talked about, whether it be Code Platoon or different resources we used while we were trying to get into tech. We'll link that stuff all in the description, as well as our personal LinkedIn's in case people want to reach out to us. Um, but yeah,
Sweet. Yeah, I think as we close this out, people can visit fallintotech.com. We'll have that in the show description, and we'll post all our social media channels as well for you guys to check out. But yeah, this has been awesome. Thanks again, Michael, for talking with me, and I'm excited for future guests. We've got quite a few lined up here, and I think we can really create a really blossoming community of veterans in tech.
same man. Looking
All
forward to
right.
the future.
Great chatting with you.